For me, that moment came on a stormy Tuesday evening, deep in the Pacific Northwest wilderness. I'm an avid hiker and wildlife photographer, so spending nights in the forest is nothing new. But this night was different. The rain was coming down in sheets, a relentless drumming against my tent, and the wind howled through the ancient cedars like a mournful spirit. It was the kind of weather that makes you feel small and insignificant against the raw power of nature. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by a sound that wasn't the storm. It was a cry, a high-pitched, desperate wail that cut through the noise of the wind and rain. At first, I thought it might be a coyote pup or maybe a lost fawn, but the longer I listened, the more I realized it was something else entirely. It had an almost human-like quality, a tone of pure, unadulterated grief that sent a shiver down my spine. My curiosity, and I'll admit, a fair bit of concern, got the better of me. I zipped up my rain jacket, grabbed my most powerful flashlight, and stepped out into the deluge. The forest was a chaotic mess of thrashing branches and running water. Following the sound was difficult. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, carried and distorted by the wind. I pushed through soaked ferns and over slippery, moss-covered logs, my flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the darkness. The crying grew louder, more frantic. It was a sound of absolute terror and loneliness. Every instinct told me to turn back, to get back in my warm, dry tent and forget I ever heard it. But I couldn't. I had to know what was out there, suffering alone in the storm. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled into a small clearing, and that's when I saw it. Huddled at the base of a massive, overturned fir tree was a small, shivering creature. It was covered in thick, matted brown fur, soaked and plastered to its tiny frame. Its face was strikingly humanoid, with large, dark eyes that were wide with fear and streaming with what looked like tears. The cries I'd been hearing were coming from this little being. It couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 feet tall. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew with a certainty that defied all logic and reason what I was looking at. It was a baby Sasquatch. All the stories, the legends, the blurry photos and grainy videos, they were all real. And here, right in front of me, was a living, breathing infant of the species, lost and terrified. My fear was instantly replaced by an overwhelming sense of pity and a primal need to help. It was just a baby, after all, a baby crying for its mother. I slowly lowered my flashlight so it was unshining directly in its eyes and took a cautious step forward. It flinched and let out another piercing wail, scrambling backward against the wet roots of the fallen tree. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm not going to hurt you." I kept my movements slow and deliberate, trying to project an aura of calm that I definitely did not feel. I crouched down to make myself appear smaller and less threatening. The little creature watched my every move, its big, intelligent eyes filled with a mixture of terror and curiosity. It had stopped crying, now just letting out soft, whimpering sounds. It was shivering violently, and I knew it couldn't stay out in this cold, driving rain for much longer. I remembered I had an emergency thermal blanket and a high-energy protein bar in my jacket pocket. Slowly, I pulled them out. I unwrapped the crinkly blanket, the sound making the little creature jump. I held it out, showing it was just a thin sheet. Then I took the protein bar, broke off a small piece, and gently tossed it a few feet in front of the baby. It stared at the piece of food, then back at me. It sniffed the air, its little nose twitching. After a long moment of hesitation, it scurried forward, snatched the piece of bar, and retreated back to its spot under the roots, gobbling it down in seconds. A small victory. I broke off another piece and tossed it a little closer to me this time. We repeated this process several times, a slow, patient game of trust. Each time it would dash out, grab the food, and retreat. It was clearly starving. My own fear had completely evaporated, replaced by this incredible connection I was forming with this impossible creature. I felt like I was communicating with something ancient, something that belonged to the very soul of the forest. I started talking to it in a low, soothing voice, telling it about my day, about the storm. Anything to fill the silence and make my presence feel normal and safe. Finally, after it had eaten the whole bar, it seemed to relax just a little. Its shivering was still bad, but the whimpers had stopped. It just sat there, watching me with those huge, soulful eyes. I decided to take a bigger risk. I unfolded the thermal blanket completely and laid it on the ground between us. Then I sat down on my side of it and waited. This was the ultimate test. Would it trust me enough to seek warmth? For a long time, it did nothing. The rain continued to pour, and I was getting soaked and cold myself. I was about to give up hope when it happened. Slowly, hesitantly, the little Sasquatch crept out from under the root ball. It took one tiny step onto the silver blanket, then another. It moved with a cautious gait, keeping its eyes locked on mine. It reached the middle of the blanket, hesitated for a second, and then curled up into a tight, furry ball. It was still a few feet away from me, but it was on the blanket, starting to share this tiny island of warmth with me. I can't even describe the feeling. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated magic. I felt a profound sense of honor that this wild, mythical creature had chosen to trust me. We sat like that for what must have been over an hour, two different beings sharing a space in the heart of a storm. The rain eventually started to soften, and the wind died down. Just as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, I heard a new sound. It was a deep, guttural call, a series of low-pitched whoops that echoed through the trees. The little creature on the blanket instantly perked up, its ears swiveled, and it let out an excited, chirping response. The call came again, closer this time. The baby Sasquatch stood up, looked at me one last time, and in its dark eyes, I swear I saw something that looked like gratitude. Then it turned and scampered off into the undergrowth in the direction of the calls. A moment later, I saw a colossal dark shape move through the trees at the edge of the clearing. It was massive, at least 8 or 9 feet tall. It paused, and I felt a pair of unseen eyes lock onto me. I held my breath, frozen in place. There was no menace, no threat. It felt more like an acknowledgement. A silent thank you. Then the shape turned and melted back into the forest, with the sounds of the smaller creatures' happy chirps following it. I sat there in the wet, muddy clearing as the sun came up, the thermal blanket still on the ground. I was cold, exhausted, and covered in mud, but I was also filled with a sense of wonder that I know will stay with me for the rest of my life. I had no proof, no photos, no fur samples, just a memory. A memory of a baby's cry in the rain, and a moment of connection that transcended species, language, and the line between legend and reality. I packed up my things and left the forest, but a part of me will always be in that clearing, waiting for the sound of a cry in the rain. Thanks for listening to my story. It's something I've held on to for a long time, and it feels good to finally share it. If you've ever had an unexplainable experience in the wild, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the edge of the map. Stay curious and stay wild.